He was supposed to be the nice guy of late-night television, the cheerful British comedian who made everyone laugh, sang with celebrities, and turned car rides into viral sensations. But somewhere along the way, the smiles started to look fake. Because behind the jokes, behind the charm, and behind that big, lovable grin was someone entirely different. Someone who treated people like props. Someone who let fame twist him into the very thing he once mocked. James Corden didn't just lose his career, he burned it from the inside out. And when the curtain finally fell, it revealed a man Hollywood couldn't wait to forget. But how did it all go so wrong? How did the world's favorite talk show host go from singing with Adele to being banned from one of New York's most exclusive restaurants? This is the story of James Corden's rise, his downfall, and the truth behind the man who fooled millions. Because sometimes the biggest smiles hide the darkest egos. But before the world turned on him, James Corden was just another struggling actor, chasing his first big break in the heart of London. Before the fame, before the controversy, James Corden was just another kid from High Wycombe, with big dreams and no clear path. He wasn't born into the industry. He didn't have the connections or the Hollywood smile yet. Just a loud laugh, a quick wit, and a willingness to take whatever role came his way. In the late 1990s, he bounced between stage performances and minor TV appearances, the kind of blink-and-you'll-miss-it parts most actors take just to stay in the game. He sang in small theater productions, popped up in Hollyoaks for a few episodes, and even tried his hand in British dramas like Fat Friends. Nothing about him screamed, "future star," but that all changed when he met Ruth Jones, his soon-to-be creative partner and co-writer of Gavin and Stacey. Together, they created something rare, a show that didn't just make people laugh, but felt real. Corden's character, Smithy, was loud, loyal, and lovable, the kind of guy everyone seemed to know in real life. For once, James wasn't playing a role. He was the role, and the audience loved it. Gavin and Stacey became a cultural phenomenon. The Christmas special alone was watched by more than half of Wales's population. Suddenly, James Corden wasn't just another actor. He was Britain's new favorite funny man. He won awards, appeared on talk shows, and became a regular face at events like the BRIT Awards and Comic Relief. But what really won people over wasn't his comedy. It was his humility. He seemed genuinely grateful for every moment of success. The audience didn't just laugh at him, they rooted for him. And for a while, it seemed like fame had found the perfect person to carry it. Someone humble, someone talented, someone who understood what it meant to come from nothing. But as we've seen before, that kind of success doesn't just change your career. It changes you. And soon, the charming underdog would become his own worst enemy. Because once James got a taste of fame, he started believing his own hype. And that's when everything began to fall apart. For most people, fame is something you dream about. For James Corden, it became a mirror, one that slowly revealed who he really was. After Gavin and Stacey, he was everywhere. Award shows, interviews, red carpets, you name it. And while he smiled for every photo and cracked jokes like the same lovable Smithy fans adored, the people closest to him started to notice a change. He wasn't the humble everyman comedian anymore. He was the star, and he made sure everyone knew it. Even Corden himself admitted later that fame had gotten to him. He told one interviewer, "That first flash of fame, it's mind-altering. You start to think you're a bit more of a dude than you really are." And for James, that flash of fame turned into a blinding spotlight. Friends began to notice the difference. His Gavin and Stacey co-star Rob Brydon tried to pull him back down to earth, telling him point blank, "Look, the way you behave affects people." Even his own sister had to remind him, "James, don't be a dick." But it was too late. The machine was already moving. Corden was being called the next big British export. His face was everywhere, his name attached to every new project, and with every headline came a little more ego. In 2009, he launched a sketch show with his co-star Matthew Horn called Horn and Corden. It was meant to be his victory lap, proof that James could do no wrong, But the critics didn't hold back. The Telegraph called it about as funny as a credit default swap. It was a brutal reminder that charm alone doesn't carry a show. Then came Lesbian Vampire Killers, a film that crashed so hard it left a crater in his career. The movie bombed at the box office and was mocked endlessly online. And instead of humbling him, it only seemed to make him more defensive. See, for Corden, failure wasn't a signal to slow down. It was fuel. He wanted to prove the critics wrong, to show that he could still be the star everyone once believed in. But in trying to protect his image, he started lashing out. And soon, the nice guy mask would slip in public for the first time. And that moment came when a national award show turned into a public meltdown, and the world saw the real James Corden for the very first time. Every celebrity has a moment when the public starts to wonder who they really are. For James Corden, that moment arrived on a glamorous night that was supposed to celebrate everyone but him. It was the 2010 Glamour Women of the Year Awards, a night honoring powerful women across entertainment. Corden was invited to host, an easy job for someone known for charm and wit. But instead of making headlines for his jokes, he made them for all the wrong reasons. Partway through the ceremony, Sir Patrick Stewart, the beloved Star Trek and X-Men actor, walked up to the stage and did something unexpected. He called out the host in front of the entire audience. He said, "When the recipients are receiving their awards, don't stand at the back of the stage with your hands in your pockets, looking around as if you wish you were anywhere else." The room fell silent. For most people, that would be the cue to laugh it off, apologize, and move on. But not James. Instead of swallowing his pride, he snapped back. "You couldn't be more wrong, sir," he fired, trying to make a joke out of it. The exchange turned into a tense back and forth that left everyone squirming in their seats. At one point, Corden mocked Stewart's weight joke with an icy comeback of his own. "You can see my belly, and we can all see you dying right now." The audience laughed awkwardly, not because it was funny, but because it was uncomfortable. What was meant to be a celebration turned into a showdown, and Corden's arrogance was on full display. When Avatar star Zoe Saldana took the stage later to accept her award, she tried to smooth things over, saying, "For whatever it's worth, I like your belly." But the damage was already done. The headlines didn't talk about the winners that night. They talked about Corden's meltdown. Some defended him, saying Patrick Stewart had provoked him. But for most people, it was the first time they saw Corden not as a lovable underdog, but as a man drunk on his own fame. Quick-tempered, defensive, and painfully unaware of how far he'd fallen from grace. From that night on, something shifted. The same fans who once called him relatable started calling him rude. And instead of learning from the embarrassment, James Corden only became more determined to prove that he was the real star of every room he walked into. Still, Hollywood loves a comeback, and Corden was about to get one. A new country, a new audience, and a second chance to rewrite his story. But the same ego would follow him across the ocean. By 2014, James Corden had done something few British comedians ever manage. He'd crossed the Atlantic and landed one of the most coveted jobs in American television. When the Late Late Show host Craig Ferguson announced his departure, CBS made a shocking choice. They picked James Corden, a name most Americans had never even heard of. At first, the reaction was disbelief. Who was this guy? Could he really replace a host as sharp and beloved as Ferguson? Even Corden seemed unsure. On his very first night, he stood in front of the camera and said softly, "It really isn't lost on me what a privilege it is to be given a show like this. I'll do my best not to let you down." And for a while, he didn't. Corden understood something that most late-night hosts didn't. People weren't watching TV the same way anymore. They were watching clips. They wanted moments they could share, replay, and talk about the next day. So instead of long monologues and scripted interviews, he built his empire on viral content. The result? Carpool karaoke. The concept was simple. Corden driving around Los Angeles with celebrities, singing their hits, and sharing personal stories between verses. But it worked like magic. Adele belting Nicki Minaj's Monster, Lady Gaga joking about fame, Justin Bieber laughing in the passenger seat. Each video racked up tens of millions of views overnight. It wasn't just a TV segment anymore. It was a global event. Every celebrity wanted a turn in that car. The show's YouTube channel exploded to over 10 million subscribers. Suddenly, James Corden wasn't just a talk show host. He was a cultural icon. He became the face of fun, harmless entertainment. He hosted the Tony Awards, the Grammys, and every Hollywood event that needed a safe, likable MC. People called him the new face of late-night television. But as the spotlight grew brighter, the same problems from before started creeping back in. Behind the friendly smile, there were whispers. Stories from staff, from waiters, from people who'd worked with him off camera. Stories that didn't sound anything like the cheerful man singing with Adele. Because while the world was falling in love with James Corden's charm on YouTube, the people who actually worked with him were seeing something very different. And soon, that picture-perfect image would start to crack. One awkward moment, one bad joke, and one public humiliation at a time. For years, James Corden had convinced the world that he was the funny, friendly face of late-night TV, the everyman who made celebrities feel human again. But behind the laughter, tiny cracks were starting to show. It began subtly, awkward moments, strange jokes, small flashes of entitlement that fans brushed off at first, but each one chipped away at the nice guy image he'd worked so hard to build. One of the first big warning signs came during a segment of Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts with fellow host Jimmy Kimmel. Kimmel asked him a simple question: name 2 of the cameramen in this room. An easy, lighthearted question. But Corden froze. He laughed nervously, stalled for time, and finally muttered an excuse. It's a different crew tonight, actually. The audience laughed it off, but the internet didn't. Viewers pointed out that he couldn't even name the people who helped make his show possible. To many, it was proof that the nice guy charm was just an act, that Corden only cared about the people in front of the camera, not behind it. Then came the moment that truly crossed the line. At a charity gala in 2017, right in the middle of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, Corden made jokes about the situation on stage. The crowd fell silent. Even in a room full of comedians, no one found it funny. Within hours, he was trending for all the wrong reasons. It was the first time people began to ask a dangerous question. Was James Corden really the kind, humble host he pretended to be? Or had he just gotten too comfortable mocking everyone else? And then came the internet's favorite battleground, Reddit. When Corden hosted an AMA to promote The Late Late Show, fans flooded the thread with stories that painted a very different picture of the man they saw on TV. One user claimed Corden had screamed at restaurant staff in London years earlier. Another said he threw tantrums on the set of A League of Their Own, belittling crew members between takes. One comment summed it up best. Seeing him in person made me realize everything on TV is an act. He's not charming, he's just cruel. Corden answered 5 questions before abruptly leaving the AMA, but the damage was already done. In just a few hours, the internet's golden boy had turned into a meme for celebrity arrogance. And as fans started sharing their own James Corden stories, the cracks in his reputation weren't small anymore. They were gaping wide open. But the internet wasn't done with him yet. Because the scandals were about to go from rumor to reality, and one dinner reservation would change everything. By 2022, James Corden's reputation was hanging by a thread. The internet already had their suspicions, but what came next would confirm everything people feared about him. It started with a restaurant, one of New York's most exclusive spots, Balthazar. On the surface, it was just another celebrity tantrum story, but the details were brutal. The restaurant's owner, Keith McNally, posted publicly on Instagram, calling Corden a tiny cretin of a man. He accused him of being obnoxiously rude to staff on multiple occasions, once after finding a hair in his food, and again when his wife's omelet was made wrong. According to the post, Corden yelled at the manager, demanded free drinks, and even threatened to leave a bad review unless everything was comped. The internet erupted. For years, fans had heard whispers of Corden being rude to servers or crew members. But now there was proof. The story wasn't coming from a jealous fan or a tabloid rumor. It came directly from the owner of one of New York's most respected restaurants. Corden quickly apologized and was briefly unbanned. He even went on his show to say, "As her meal came wrong the third time, I made a sarcastic comment, and I deeply regret it." But the damage was done, because just days later, he backtracked, telling reporters that he did nothing wrong on any level, and that single sentence erased any sympathy people had left. To the public, it was clear. James Corden didn't just have a bad night. He had a bad character. And as that story spread, so did others. Waiters, assistants, and former staff members began sharing their own experiences, painting a picture of a man who treated kindness like a performance and respect like an inconvenience. Then came the petition, a public campaign demanding that Corden be banned from the movie adaptation of Wicked. It reached over 100,000 signatures in just a few days. Even casual fans were turning against him, and every attempt he made to rebuild his image only made things worse. When he appeared in the Friends reunion as the moderator, fans called him the worst possible choice. His film roles, from Cats to the Prom, became easy targets for mockery. Critics weren't just unimpressed, they were tired of him. The man who once hosted the Grammys and sang with Adele had become the punchline of his own career. And what made it worse, he couldn't see it. Instead of self-reflection, Corden seemed to shrug everything off. Every scandal, every rumor, every mistake. It was always someone else's fault, or just a misunderstanding. But the audience wasn't buying it anymore. The charm had worn off. The jokes weren't funny. The nice guy act had finally expired. But as the public turned on him, another blow was coming. One that wouldn't just ruin his image, but destroy the very show that made him famous. By early 2023, James Corden was no longer Hollywood's golden boy. He was a PR nightmare that even CBS couldn't spin anymore. The scandals had piled up, the goodwill had evaporated, and the ratings were sinking faster than ever. But the final nail in the coffin came from the one thing that had made him famous in the first place: carpool karaoke. For years, the segment had been his golden ticket. It was the perfect blend of charm, humor, and celebrity appeal. But in January 2023, a fan posted a video on Twitter that changed everything. James Corden and Justin Bieber filming carpool karaoke, with the car being towed by a truck. He wasn't driving. The entire illusion, the one that made fans feel like they were watching something spontaneous and real, shattered instantly. The internet exploded. The clip went viral within hours, and suddenly, millions of people realized what they were watching wasn't genuine. Of course, Corden tried to laugh it off. He went on air and said, "I swear, 95% of the time I really am endangering the lives of the world's biggest pop stars." He even made a list of when he had used a tow truck, and when he hadn't. But the joke didn't land, because this time, the audience wasn't laughing with him. They were laughing at him. The illusion was gone. Carpool karaoke wasn't authentic. His apologies weren't sincere. His kindness wasn't real. Every part of the James Corden brand suddenly felt manufactured, and people were done pretending otherwise. As the outrage grew, the Late Late Show's ratings hit an all-time low. From nearly 1 million weekly viewers to barely 670,000, the decline was undeniable. Sponsors pulled out. The viral clips stopped going viral. Even his celebrity guests started to seem awkward, trying to laugh through what everyone already knew, that the magic was gone. Then, in April 2023, Corden made the announcement. After 8 years as host, he was leaving the Late Late Show. He told fans it was so he could spend more time with his family, that his son was growing up, and it was time to go home. It sounded wholesome, heartfelt, but few people believed it. Because by then, it wasn't about family. It was about damage control. His reputation had become so toxic that CBS didn't just let him walk away. They decided to end the show entirely. No new host, no replacement, just over. The same network that once gambled on James Corden now wanted nothing to do with him. And in the end, the man who once made the world laugh walked away from Hollywood with nothing but silence. Looking back, it's almost poetic. How a man who built a career on being likable became one of the most disliked figures in entertainment. But James Corden's story isn't just about fame. It's about how quickly it can vanish when the mask finally slips. Looking back, James Corden's story feels almost poetic. A man who built his fame on charm and humility, destroyed by his own arrogance and pride. It's the same story we've seen before. Ellen DeGeneres, once known for kindness, exposed for cruelty behind the scenes. Corden, once celebrated as the lovable British everyman, revealed to be the same, a performer who forgot where the performance ended. Both of them built careers on a single illusion, that they were different from the rest of Hollywood, more grounded, more genuine. But in the end, they became the very thing they claimed not to be, proof that the entertainment industry doesn't corrupt you. It simply shows you off to the world, exactly as you are. When The Late Late Show finally ended in April 2023, it wasn't just a TV show that died. It was an era. The era of pretending kindness was content, because audiences had changed. They didn't want a host who could fake humility anymore. They wanted authenticity, the one thing James Corden could never fully deliver. After leaving the US, Corden quietly returned to the UK. He stepped back into theater, reprised his role as Smithy in Gavin and Stacey, and began what looked like a calm, quiet restart of his career. But even as he tried to rebuild, the internet didn't forget. Every clip, every scandal, every moment of arrogance lives online forever. A permanent record of how fast a good image can crumble when you stop respecting the people who built it. James Corden isn't a villain. He's a cautionary tale, a reminder that charm without humility is just ego in disguise. And no matter how famous you get, the moment you stop treating people with respect, the world will notice. Because fame doesn't last forever, but reputation does. And for James Corden, that reputation will always carry one lesson. You can sing in the car with every celebrity in Hollywood, but if you forget how to treat the person sitting next to you with kindness, you'll end up driving alone. James Corden isn't the first star to fall from grace, and he won't be the last. Because for every celebrity downfall, there's always another waiting just around the corner.